I never expected that sharing a hammock would change my life, but that's exactly what happened. It seems like such a small, trivial thing, a piece of canvas and rope strung between two trees. But life has a way of using the most ordinary objects to orchestrate the most extraordinary shifts. Before that afternoon, my world was a neat, predictable, and quietly lonely place. Afterward, well, everything tilted on its axis, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of falling. My name is Miles, and at the time, I was a 27-year-old freelance copy editor. My life was lived through a screen, arranging words for other people, polishing their thoughts until they gleamed. I worked from home, a small but pleasant one-bedroom apartment in a complex called the Courtyards. It was a U-shaped building, 3 stories high, wrapped around a lovely communal green space. This little patch of grass, with its mature oak trees and scattered picnic tables, was the main reason I'd chosen the place. It felt like a promise of community, even if I was too shy to actively seek it out. My routine was my sanctuary. I'd wake up, make coffee, and sit at my desk, which I'd positioned to overlook the courtyard. From my second-floor window, I had a perfect, unobtrusive view of the little dramas that played out below. I saw Mrs. Gable from 1A walk her yapping terrier at precisely 7:15 every morning. I saw the college kids in 3C stumble home late on weekends. And I saw him. I saw Caleb. Caleb lived in the apartment directly across from mine. He was the kind of man you noticed without trying. Tall, with broad shoulders and an easy, athletic way of moving. I guess he was around my age, maybe a year or two older. He worked in construction or landscaping, something physical. He'd leave early in a dusty pickup truck and come home in the late afternoon, his t-shirts often smudged with dirt and his boots heavy with mud. I watched him carry groceries, 2 full bags in each hand, as if they weighed nothing. I watched him help Mr. Henderson from the ground floor fix a wobbly leg on a patio chair. He was, from my distant vantage point, effortlessly capable. He radiated a kind of simple, confident energy that I, in my quiet world of grammar and punctuation, found both intimidating and deeply fascinating. He was a complete sentence, declarative and strong. I was a series of ellipses, full of pauses and unspoken thoughts. I painted a whole picture of him in my head. He probably played football in high school, loved beer and sports, and had a pretty girlfriend who laughed at all his jokes. He was the sun-drenched courtyard. I was the dimly lit room looking out at it. He was, in every way I could imagine, completely and utterly straight. So I kept my distance, content to observe, to fold this one-sided, harmless crush into the quiet fabric of my daily routine. Then came the hammock. One Tuesday, the building management installed it. It was a big, sturdy-looking thing, a 2-person hammock made of thick, woven cotton in a pleasant navy blue. They strung it between the 2 largest oak trees, right in the center of the lawn. For a few days, it just hung there, an invitation. The college kids used it once, piling in with a noisy carelessness that made me cringe, fearing for the ropes. But mostly, it remained empty. It was a Thursday, one of those perfect late spring afternoons when the air is warm, but not yet heavy. I had finished my work for the day, and the silence in my apartment felt louder than usual. On a whim, I grabbed a book I'd been meaning to read and headed downstairs. My heart did a little nervous flutter. It felt like a bold move, inserting myself into the open space instead of just observing it. The courtyard was empty. The sun filtered through the oak leaves, creating shifting patterns on the grass. The hammock swayed gently in the breeze. Getting into a hammock alone is an exercise in gracelessness, isn't it? I fumbled with it, swinging a leg over and nearly tipping the whole thing, before finally collapsing into its center with a soft oof. For a moment, I just lay there, wrapped in a cocoon of blue fabric, staring up at the canopy of leaves against the brilliant sky. The gentle rocking was instantly soothing. The tension in my shoulders began to dissolve. I opened my book, and for a while, the world consisted only of printed words and the whisper of the wind. I'm not sure how long I was out there before the sound of a screen door sliding shut broke the spell. I instinctively tensed, my privacy breached. I peeked over the edge of the hammock. It was Caleb. He was walking across the lawn, not in his work clothes, but in a pair of gray sweatpants and a simple white t-shirt that stretched across his chest. He wasn't heading for his truck or the mailboxes. He was heading directly for me. My mind raced. Abort mission. Get out. Pretend you were just leaving. But my limbs felt heavy, and the rocking of the hammock seemed to hold me in place. He stopped a few feet away, a small, friendly smile on his face. He had a kindness in his eyes that you couldn't see from a second-story window. "Hey," he said, his voice warm and even. "Looks comfortable." "Oh, yeah, it is." I managed, my own voice sounding thin and reedy. I felt my face heat up. I was just, trying it out. I made a move to sit up, to offer him the spot. It was the polite thing to do. It was the safe thing to do. But he held up a hand, stopping me. "No, don't get up," he said. And then he followed it with a question that completely derailed my brain. "Mind if I join? It looks big enough." Mind if he joined? The question hung in the air between us, charged with possibility. My internal monologue went into overdrive. People don't just join strangers in hammocks, do they? Is this a thing? Maybe it's a thing for friendly, confident people. Maybe he just sees it as a piece of furniture, like sharing a park bench. Or maybe, no, don't go there, Miles. I realized I'd been silent for too long. "Oh, sure. Yeah, of course." I finally stammered, scooting myself over as far as I could. The hammock lurched with my movement. I tried to make myself smaller, to occupy as little space as possible. Caleb approached the hammock with a casual confidence that was the polar opposite of my own flailing entrance. He placed one hand on each side of the fabric, found his balance, and settled into the space next to me with a smooth, controlled motion. The hammock dipped low under his weight, and for a wild second, I felt like I was going to be rolled right on top of him. Gravity, it seemed, was a Caleb fan. We were close, impossibly close. Our shoulders were pressed together, a line of warmth and solid muscle against my own bony frame. My arm was flush against his, the fine, dark hairs on his skin tickling mine. The scent of fresh laundry and something uniquely him, clean and earthy, filled the small space around us. I held my breath, my book line forgotten on my chest. "I'm Caleb, by the way," he said, turning his head slightly to look at me. His eyes were a startling shade of hazel, flecked with green and gold in the dappled sunlight. "Miles," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. I forced myself to meet his gaze for a second before looking back up at the leaves. I was acutely aware of every point of contact between our bodies. The side of his leg was warm against mine. I could feel the rhythmic, steady rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. An awkward silence stretched for a moment, thick with my own anxiety. I was sure he could hear my heart hammering against my ribs. But then he spoke again, his tone easy and conversational. "So you're the guy in 2B, right? The writer?" My head snapped toward him in surprise. "You know who I am?" He chuckled, a low, pleasant sound that vibrated through the hammock. "Yeah, I've seen you at your desk. You always look so focused. I figured you were a writer or something." The thought that he had noticed me, even in such a passing way, sent a jolt through my system. I had spent months watching him, assuming I was completely invisible. But he had been watching me too. "I'm an editor, actually," I explained, feeling a sudden need to be precise. "I just clean up other people's writing." "An editor," he repeated, sounding genuinely interested. "That's cool. Must take a lot of patience." He shifted slightly, the movement sending a gentle sway through the hammock. Our hips brushed against each other. I squeezed my eyes shut for a brief second. "I don't think I have the patience for that. I'm better at building things than I am with words." "You're in construction?" I asked, latching onto the topic, desperate to steer the conversation away from myself. "Something like that," he said. "Landscape design and construction. I build retaining walls, patios, that kind of thing. Right now, I'm working on a big botanical garden project downtown." A botanical garden. The image didn't quite fit with the dusty pickup truck and the calloused hands I'd imagined. It was more delicate, more artistic. "That sounds amazing," I said, and I meant it. "I guess you must know a lot about plants." A slow smile spread across his face. "A little bit," he admitted. "More than I ever thought I would. See that tree?" He lifted an arm, and for a heart-stopping moment I thought he was going to put it around me, but he just pointed upwards. "That's a bur oak. Quercus macrocarpa. They're amazing. They can live for 300, 400 years. And they're incredibly fire-resistant." I stared at him. He spoke about the tree with a quiet passion, a reverence that I hadn't expected. This was the first crack in the facade I had built for him. He wasn't just the strong, physical guy. He was thoughtful, He had this hidden well of knowledge, of appreciation for the natural world. My carefully constructed image of him began to crumble, replaced by something far more complex and compelling. "Wow," I said softly. "I just thought it was an oak tree." "It is," he laughed. "But it's also a whole ecosystem. There are probably 100 different species of insects and fungi living in its bark." He turned his head to look at me again, his smile softening. "Sorry, I'm geeking out." "No, don't be," I rushed to say. It's really interesting," and it was. The world felt bigger, richer, just listening to him. The proximity that had initially terrified me was starting to feel comfortable. The warmth of his body next to mine was less of an alarm and more of a steady, grounding presence. We fell into an easy rhythm of conversation. I asked him more about his work, and he described the challenge of designing a garden that would flourish for decades. He asked me about editing, and I found myself explaining the satisfaction of finding the perfect word or untangling a clumsy sentence. It was the most I had talked to anyone in person all week. At some point, he shifted his weight to get more comfortable, and his hand came to rest on the canvas of the hammock, right beside my thigh. It wasn't touching me, not quite, but it was there, a breath of space away. My skin tingled in anticipation. The casualness of the gesture felt intensely intimate. Every nerve in my body was aware of that hand, of the potential for it to move just a fraction of an inch and make contact. I tried to focus on his words, on the story he was telling about a stubborn client who wanted to plant tropical flowers in a temperate climate, but my brain was a buzzing hive of sensation. The sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The air grew cooler. I knew I should probably go inside. It was getting late. I had dinner to think about, emails to check. The sensible part of my brain was screaming at me to end this before I did something stupid, like lean my head on his shoulder. Well, I should probably. I started, beginning to gather my book and brace myself for the awkward process of exiting the hammock. "Wait," he said, his voice quiet. And then it happened. I pushed myself up slightly, intending to swing my legs over the side. But my movement was clumsy, and it set the hammock into a wide, swooping arc. The ground seemed to drop away beneath me. A gasp escaped my lips, and I instinctively grabbed for the sides, my knuckles white. I've never had great balance, and the sudden, uncontrolled motion sent a spike of panic through me. I felt like I was going to be tossed out onto the grass. "Whoa, easy." Caleb's voice was a low rumble right next to my ear. Before I could even process what was happening, his arm shot out, not to steady the hammock, but to steady me. He wrapped it securely around my chest, pulling me back against him. His other hand grabbed the rope above his head, using his weight to slow the momentum. The world stopped swinging. Or rather, the hammock did. My world had just tilted into an entirely new orbit. My back was pressed firmly against his chest. I could feel the solid, rhythmic beat of his heart against my shoulder blades. His arm was a warm, heavy band across my ribs, holding me in place. My head was tucked just under his chin, and I could feel his breath stirring my hair. The scent of him was all-encompassing now, warm and clean, and overwhelmingly male. We were no longer two people sharing a space. We were one tangled shape, suspended between two trees, cocooned from the rest of the world. "You okay?" he murmured, his voice a vibration that traveled straight through my bones. I couldn't speak. I could only nod, a tiny, jerky movement. My panic from the swinging had been instantly replaced by a different kind of panic, a thrilling, terrifying awareness. This was too much. This was everything I had secretly, foolishly, wanted. I should have pulled away. I should have said, "Thanks, I'm good now." I should have extracted myself from his embrace and from the situation entirely. But I was paralyzed. And here's the thing. He didn't let go. The immediate danger of me falling out was over. The hammock was barely moving, just a gentle, lazy sway. But his arm remained. It didn't tighten, it didn't loosen. It just stayed, a firm, possessive, and yet incredibly gentle weight. He held me there, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As if he was waiting for something. Or maybe, he just didn't want the moment to end. Seconds stretched into a small eternity. I was so close I could hear the soft scratch of his stubble against the fabric of his shirt when he breathed. I focused on the details, trying to anchor myself. The solid wall of his torso behind me. The strength in the arm around my chest. The way his fingers were curled loosely against my side. This wasn't just a reflex anymore. A reflex is quick, functional, and it ends. This was a choice. He was actively choosing to hold me. A war was raging inside me. One part of my brain, the logical, self-protective part, was screaming that I was misreading this. That he was just being nice, making sure I was steady before he let go. That I was projecting all my own hopes onto a simple, kind gesture. It was a warning system, honed by years of caution and quiet disappointment. But another part of me, a smaller, braver part that I had long kept silenced, was whispering a different story. It was telling me to pay attention to the way his breathing hadn't changed, how calm he was. It was telling me to notice that his body wasn't tense with awkwardness, but relaxed, settled. It was telling me that no one holds a person like this by accident. This felt deliberate. It felt like a question being asked without words. I finally found my voice, but it was weak. I think it stopped swinging now. It was a test. A gentle prompt for him to release me. He didn't move for a second. Then, I felt him take a slow, deep breath. "Yeah," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "I guess it has." And then, slowly, reluctantly, his arm loosened. The warmth and weight of it vanished from my chest, and a sudden cold rushed in to fill the space. He shifted back to his side of the hammock, and the intimate bubble we had been in popped, leaving behind a silence that was more charged and electric than any sound. I couldn't look at him. I stared straight ahead at the darkening lawn, my body buzzing. Without another word, I swung my legs over the side, successfully this time, and stood on wobbly feet. I felt his eyes on me. I should go," I said, not turning around. "Thanks. For, catching me." "Any time, Miles," he said. His voice was quiet, and I couldn't decipher its tone. I practically fled across the courtyard, my book clutched to my chest like a shield. I didn't dare look back. I fumbled with my keys, burst into my apartment, and shut the door behind me, leaning against it as my heart thundered. I stood there in the dark, trying to catch my breath, the phantom sensation of his arms still wrapped around me. The days that followed were a special kind of torture. My apartment, once my sanctuary, now felt like a cage. My window, once a source of detached pleasure, was now a source of anxiety. I found myself both desperate to see Caleb and terrified of it. I'd peek through the blinds, my heart leaping into my throat every time I saw his truck pull in, only to shrink back into the shadows, afraid of being seen. We fell into a new, excruciatingly awkward routine. If we happened to be in the courtyard at the same time, we'd exchange a brief, tight-lipped nod. No more friendly waves. No more smiles. The easy space that had existed before the hammock was gone, replaced by a thick, unspoken tension. It was like we had stumbled across a secret door and, instead of opening it, we had both pretended we never saw it at all. My mind became a relentless courtroom where I was both prosecutor and defense attorney, putting that single moment on trial. I replayed it hundreds of times, a slow-motion film reel in my head. The evidence for the prosecution was strong. Case file A, he's a nice guy. He was just being helpful. Men, especially strong, capable men, help people who are about to fall. It's instinct. You're reading into it because you want to. You're lonely, and you've built him up in your head. The prolonged hold? He was probably just lost in thought, or didn't want to seem abrupt. It meant nothing. But then the defense would take the stand. Case file B, the look in his eyes right before. The way he asked to join me in the first place, a breach of normal social boundaries. The complete lack of awkwardness on his part during the embrace. The reluctance in his voice when he finally said, "I guess it has," and most damning of all, the hold itself. It wasn't a frantic grab. It was a secure, settled embrace. It felt possessive, protective. It felt intentional. I oscillated wildly between these two poles. 1 hour, I'd be convinced I was a fool, my face burning with embarrassment for having imagined an entire romantic narrative out of a simple act of kindness. The next hour, a spark of hope would ignite, and I'd be equally convinced that it was a pivotal moment, a clear signal that I had been too afraid to return. My work suffered. I'd find myself staring at a manuscript, having read the same paragraph a dozen times without absorbing a single word. My thoughts were consumed by him, by Caleb, by the space in the hammock. Did he feel this tension too? Or was it all in my head? Was he walking around his apartment, completely oblivious, while I was across the courtyard dissecting his every breath. The thought was mortifying. Maybe he thought I was the weird one. Maybe my panicked flight from the scene had made him regret being friendly in the first place. I had created a perfect feedback loop of anxiety, where my fear of rejection was causing me to act in a way that would almost certainly guarantee it. I tried to break the cycle. On Saturday, I resolved to act normal. Just be a normal human being, Miles. I forced myself to go down to the laundry room, a task I usually save for odd hours to avoid interaction. As luck would have it, Caleb was there, folding a load of t-shirts on the communal table. My resolve crumbled into dust. "Hey," he said, his voice neutral. He didn't look up from his folding. "Hey," I squeaked back, moving quickly to my machine and pretending to be intensely interested in the detergent settings. The silence in the small room was deafening, broken only by the hum of the dryers. I could feel his presence like a physical weight. The air was thick with everything we weren't saying. I loaded my clothes, slammed the door shut, and practically ran out of the room without a backward glance. Normal, right? I was a complete and utter disaster. That night, I decided I had to let it go. It was just a moment. A weird, charged, unforgettable moment, but a moment nonetheless. I was driving myself crazy. He was the confident, straight construction worker. I was the shy, gay editor. We lived in different worlds that had briefly, accidentally, collided. It was time to return to my orbit. I closed my blinds, cutting off my view of the courtyard. I put on music and tried to lose myself in a book. I would forget the feeling of his arm around me. I would forget the kindness in his hazel eyes. I would forget. I was just starting to drift off to sleep a few hours later when a soft knock sounded at my door. My heart jumped. No one ever knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting a package. I wasn't expecting anyone. I lay perfectly still, hoping they would go away. Another knock, a little more insistent this time. "Miles." It was Caleb's voice. My blood turned to ice and fire all at once. What could he possibly want at this hour? Was there an emergency? Did I leave something in the laundry room? My mind spun with 1,000 frantic possibilities. I slid out of bed, my feet cold on the wood floor. I pulled on a hoodie over my pajama shirt and crept to the door, my eye pressed to the peephole. There he was, standing in the fluorescent-lit hallway, looking nervous. That was the first thing I noticed. The easy confidence was gone. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, and his hands were shoved into the pockets of his jeans. He looked at my door as if he was trying to solve a complex puzzle. He looked vulnerable, and that, more than anything, gave me the courage to open the door. I opened it just a crack, peering out at him. "Caleb, is everything okay?" He met my eyes, and I saw a flicker of relief in his. "Hey, yeah, everything's fine. Sorry to bother you so late." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd never seen him make before. It was a nervous habit. Can we talk for a second?" My throat was dry. This was it. The conversation. He was here to clear the air, to tell me he was sorry if I got the wrong impression, that he was straight, and could we please just go back to being friendly neighbors? I braced myself for the gentle, soul-crushing rejection. "Okay," I said, my voice thin, and I opened the door wider to let him in. He stepped inside, and my small apartment seemed to shrink around him. He stood awkwardly in the entryway, looking around at my bookshelves, my tidy desk, the life I had so carefully curated. I just stood there, my arms crossed over my chest, waiting for the verdict. He turned back to me, and his gaze was intense. "Look, I'm just gonna say it, because I'm not good at this." He gestured vaguely between us. "I've been a complete wreck for the past few days, and I think you have been too." I could only nod. The honesty of his statement took my breath away. "That day," he continued, his voice lowering, "in the hammock, I need you to know, that wasn't an accident." The world tilted again, but this time it was a slow, deliberate realignment. Every anxious thought, every self-doubting spiral, every fear I had wrestled with, it all just stopped. He had said it. He had confirmed my most secret, fragile hope. "When you started to fall," he went on, taking a small step closer, "I grabbed you. And then, I didn't let go. I didn't want to. Miles, I've been wanting to talk to you for months." "You have." The words came out as a squeak. He nodded, a faint, self-deprecating smile touching his lips. "Yeah, I kept seeing you through your window. You looked so serious and interesting. And I'm just this guy who builds walls for a living." I had no idea how to even start a conversation with you. So when I saw you in the hammock, I took a chance. It was probably stupid and forward. No, I said, my voice finding its strength. It wasn't stupid. And then I held on for too long and freaked you out, he said, his brow furrowed with regret. You ran away, and I figured I'd completely blown it. I thought I made you uncomfortable. This was the moment where I could retreat back into my shell or step out of it completely. I chose to step out. You didn't freak me out, Caleb, I said, my voice steady and clear. You? I didn't run because I was uncomfortable. I ran because I was overwhelmed. Because I wanted it to be real so badly, and I was terrified that it was all in my head. A wave of understanding washed over his face, erasing the anxiety and replacing it with something soft and luminous. So it wasn't just in my head either, he asked, his voice full of a hopeful wonder that mirrored my own. No, I whispered, shaking my head. It wasn't. He closed the remaining distance between us. He was so close now I could see the flecks of green in his eyes. He gently reached out and placed his hand on my arm, right over my heart. His touch was electric, but this time I didn't flinch. I leaned into it. Good, he breathed out, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. That's really good. And then he kissed me. It wasn't like the embrace in the hammock, which had been born of chaos and surprise. This was quiet and sure and unbelievably tender. It was a question and an answer all at once. It was the end of the awkward silence and the beginning of a new kind of conversation. I melted into him, my hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady, solid beat of his heart beneath my palms. It felt like coming home to a place I had never been before. When we finally broke apart, we just stood there for a moment, forehead to forehead, breathing the same air. The tension of the past week had evaporated, leaving behind a profound sense of peace. So, he said softly, a wide, genuine smile finally breaking across his face. The botanical garden project I'm on? They have a members-only night next week. I was wondering if you'd like to come with me. I laughed, a real, joyful laugh that felt like it came from a part of me that had been dormant for years. I would love that, I said. But you'll have to tell me what all the trees are called. It's a date, he said. And it was. In the weeks that followed, my world blossomed. Our first date at the botanical garden was magical. Caleb walked me through greenhouses filled with exotic flowers and towering ferns, his quiet passion for his work making it all the more beautiful. We started spending our evenings together, sometimes at his place, sometimes at mine. I learned that he wasn't just a builder of walls. He was a creator of beautiful spaces. And he learned that I wasn't just an editor of words. I had my own stories to tell. Our favorite spot, of course, remained the hammock. We spent countless hours there, curled up together under the stars, talking about everything and nothing. It was our place. The awkwardness was replaced by an easy intimacy, a comfortable silence that spoke volumes. We'd lie there, his arm wrapped around me, my head resting on his chest, the gentle rocking a soothing rhythm for our new life together. One cool evening, wrapped in a blanket and swaying gently, Caleb turned to me. A playful glint was in his eye. You know, he said, his voice a low rumble against my ear. I'm still never letting you out of this hammock. I looked up at him, at this man who had seemed so unattainable, so much a part of a world that wasn't mine. He was my world now. I smiled, feeling a profound sense of rightness, of peace. Good, I whispered, settling back against his chest. I'm not planning on going anywhere. It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes you think you need to build walls around your heart to keep it safe. You stay in your quiet room, observing life from a distance, believing that's the only way to avoid getting hurt. But I learned that vulnerability isn't about the risk of falling. It's about the hope that someone will be there to catch you. Caleb didn't just catch me when I stumbled. He held me steady, showing me that the safest place in the world wasn't a fortress of my own making, but a space shared with someone else. Sometimes, you don't realize you're exactly where you're meant to be until someone gently, lovingly, refuses to let you go.